It sounded like church. Sweet all up. So everyone is in agreement with Lord Williams. That's an issue. So thank you very much for those kind remarks and to everyone who received the microphone. Definitely want to give a special thanks to the board members of 100 Black Men. We have our third vice president, Thomas Byerson. Treasurer, Fred Davis. Does not have anyone on there who wills to come without it. We do have our past president, immediate past president, Michael Garner. Other members today, I hope I'm not forgetting any of the executive board. We have definitely our hard workers also here, so thank you all for the great work that you do. So good evening to all of you. I hope that you're all well. Thank you for joining us for this presentation and dialogue on the state of Black America. 100 Black Men prides itself on putting on these type of programs to not only educate the community, but also to partner with like-minded organizations. We are an organization that was formed in 1963 by prominent Black men in New York City. Fast forward to nearly 60 years, we have almost 100 chapters throughout the United States and abroad. And this happens to be the founding chapter, so we're very, very proud of that. As Courtney mentioned, we are the 2022 large chapter of the year. So that is something that we as an organization, membership and community should be very proud of. We cannot do this work by ourselves. Although we are 100 Black men, there are at least 100 plus women who stand behind us, encourage us, and allow us to do this work. So shout out to the spouses and significant others of our members. We also have a thriving chapter in New Orleans, or as some people say, which is where our speaker is from. His bio reads like a novel on Black excellence. So I know that I will not be able to do justice, so I'll just add some highlights, or include some highlights to it. So in 1980, Marc earned a bachelor's degree in economics and African American studies at the University of Pennsylvania in Philadelphia. And he earned his JD, Juris Doctorate degree, in 1983 from Georgetown University in Washington, D.C. At Georgetown, he was elected first-year delegate to the Student Bar Association and served as a member and head of fundraising for the National Black Law Students Association. Can't help himself. And I'll tell you why. He began his career as a lawyer in New Orleans, and in 1985, he established a private law practice there. Morial served as Louisiana State Senator from 1992 to 94, Mayor of New Orleans from 94 to 2002, and as the city's youngest mayor. His dad also served as mayor. And president of the United States Conference of Mayors in 2001. Always correct. And he is the current president and CEO of the National Urban League. We are excited this evening to have Marc speak to us on the state of Black America in the wake of police brutality, the pandemic, racial, financial, educational inequity, and the list goes on. This presentation is as timely as ever. So without further delay, I'd like to introduce my frat brother, the Honorable Marc Morial.
First of all, good evening. I am so honored to be here tonight. I'm filled by what I have been able to listen to. And let me certainly acknowledge the president of the chapter 06. And just acknowledge the tremendous work and impact of the 100 here in New York, but all across the nation. Because it's a demonstration of the power of positivity by Black men, often overlooked, stereotyped, misunderstood, and marginalized. And what 100 Black Men stands for is we will not be marginalized, misunderstood, or diminished. So give yourselves a big round of applause. Acknowledge Reverend Patrick Young, who's been helping us as our special advisor for religious affairs. Thank you, Reverend Young. And members of our team who are here, Jeffrey Richardson, stand up there. Leading our justice work, and I'll talk about that later. Lloyd Williams, the unofficial mayor of Parliament. Always representing and always dropping wisdom from our ancestors into the present. Thank you, Lord. Let me get right to the point about the state of Black America by first resetting the history and the reason for the report. So 1976, Gerald Ford was president. Vernon Jordan, like many, sat down to listen to President Ford present his State of the Union address. Sat down and listened to President Ford go on for maybe close to an hour, as those State of the Union addresses last a long time. And noticed that President Ford did not mention cities, urban America, Black America, poverty, overlooked the idea that in those times, in the post-civil rights decade of the 70s, there was a deep recession and high unemployment. There were a range of issues and challenges and problems. So Vernon Jordan, in his own inimitable way, said, I'll do my own thing. Thus, the State of Black America report was born in 1976, and it was an assembly of a number of scholars, Black scholars, to opine on the state of Black America. Since then, we published this report in an effort to create a look with a combination of research and opinion and recommendations on the challenges, the hopes, the aspirations, and the opportunity for Black Americans. But it is and should be understood that any commentary on Black America is a commentary on what? All of America. Because of the indispensable intertwining of Black experiences with American experiences. When I joined the National Urban League almost 2 decades ago, I wanted to take the report and add new heft to it. Part of that heft was to create a statistical framework to measure progress each and every year. So since 2004, we have released what we call the Equality Index. Not to get you bogged down in a lot of numbers, it basically compares the social and economic status of Black Americans to the social and economic status of white Americans. We look at 300 data sets and combine them into an index where the number 1 represents the status of white Americans. So what does that index show? It shows that the status of Black Americans is at 73% that of white Americans. In some areas like economics and social justice, the gap is significantly wider. In some like education and health, it is somewhat lower. So that statistical index, the reason for it is that discussions about race and Black people can be colorful and entertaining and opinionated and based on bad facts. debates about the condition of Black America without understanding the numbers and the statistics are out. From, oh, everything is worse, to everything is better, to this is not the same. The truth is, the painful truth is that the relative numbers have not materially changed in the last 15 years. Not materially changed, but we always have with Black America what I call the caboose effect. So in the economy, one might say the Black unemployment rate is now down to 6%, and that's one of the lowest rates recorded in modern American history. That's true, but it's still twice as high as the white rate. So Black Americans remain a caboose. If the train speeds up, we move faster. But in terms of our positioning on the train, we remain last. And this is what's important about understanding the state of Black America from a statistical and a numerical standpoint. So I invite your attention online at NUL.org to the report for this year and also for previous years, if you want to take a look at the comparison. But let me tell you about this year's report. This year's report is about American democracy and the fact that there is a plot to undermine and destroy American democracy. And I am not an alarmist given to hyperbole or exaggeration. Let me paint this picture. 2008, the historic election of Barack Obama takes place. In that election cycle, for the first time since 1964, the Black American voter turnout exceeded white American. Number two, Barack Obama managed to do something that no candidate had ever been able to do, and that was to build a campaign around small dollar donations. At a time when the laws, in fact, capped donations, didn't allow unlimited outside money. And that formula yielded an election where he won a electoral college majority and a popular vote majority. No Democrat from 1976 to 2008 had succeeded in achieving that. Clinton won twice. In neither of Clinton's elections had he gotten a popular vote majority. Both times he was in 92 at 43%. In 96, he was at 49%. Of course, in three-way elections. So Obama shocked the foundations of the political world of America. Those who lost that election, actors on the right and the far right, swung into action. And they swung into action with what I call a shh. We have to start this effort to unravel the mechanism of this election. But we can't let anyone know we're doing it. We have to be quiet, we have to be careful, and we have to commit, we have to create a cover story, otherwise known as a lie, to position this in the court of public opinion. So what were the elements of the campaign? Number one, we have to go to the courts and we have to undermine this system of small money elections, small money donations. So what that involved was a direct attack using the First Amendment from the campaign law. And they secured, through that attack, a decision from the Supreme Court declaring that law, which capped donations, unconstitutional and opened the gates for super PACs, for people to give 20 million, 30 million, 40 million, 50 million, 10 million, 1 million, to set up their own independent campaigns for or against the candidate. And wink and nod, just don't coordinate with the candidate, wink and nod. That's the first thing. Second thing, we've got to disable this law called the Voting Rights Act. This law called the Voting Rights Act is preventing us from doing what we need to do in the states to make it more difficult for people to vote. We have to disable it. So like we did with McCain, fine, we went to the courts. We're gonna go to the courts. First time they went, Shelby won 2010. They lost. John Roberts, the Chief Justice, invited them to bring another case and come back. 2013, the Supreme Court strikes down Section 5 of the Voting Rights Act, which incidentally applies to certain boroughs here in New York State. It was the Justice Department's ability to invalidate voting law changes through an administrative process. So bottom line, did it have an effect? Immediately after the election of Obama in 2008, all of a sudden, state after state after state, all these voter suppression, voter ID, voter purge bills started popping up in state legislatures all across the nation. The cover story was, we must fight fraud. This is an integrity move. Why would anybody be against integrity? It was not an integrity move. It was a suppression move. It was, we must shrink the electorate. And we must allow big money donors to play in an unlimited way to offset these small donations that Obama was able to secure and finance his campaign by in 2008. This effort in 2013 led to the Supreme Court, again, as I said, striking down the important part of the Voting Rights Act. Within minutes, states like Texas, Georgia, and North Carolina introduced voter ID laws. Within minutes, they introduced laws to reapportion their legislative districts and congressional districts mid-decade. Within minutes, there was a proliferation of proposals around the country to shrink the electorate in 2013. Fast forward, 2016 election comes. Now I might add, 2016 the election comes along. What begins to happen in late 2015? You see this fella who just invaded Ukraine, Vladimir Putin. He got busy, very, very busy, interfering with the 2016 election. Now the press did a piss poor job in exposing the true intent of the interference campaign. What was the true intent of the 2016 interference campaign? To suppress the Black vote. And how did they do it? They engaged in a multi-million-dollar sophisticated online campaign. Its primary mechanism was to set up Russian bots who posed as Black Lives Matter activists with fake Twitter handles to post millions of pieces of content saying to Black voters, do not vote. Elected officials, especially Democratic elected officials, are sellouts. You should send a message, boycott the election. Boycott the election. And they posted thousands of videos on YouTube, millions of Twitter and Facebook posts. My favorite Russian bot was a Russian bot named Woke Luisa. Now, if you look at Woke Luisa's handle, there's Woke Luisa. Homegirl's rocking a Pam Grier fro. She's got a fist up. She's Woke Luisa. Problem was Woke Luisa doesn't exist. She's a Russian. Time after time they did this. The coup de grace of their campaign was late in the campaign. They posted a banner and pushed it around. Beautiful banner that said African Americans for Hillary Clinton. Beautiful picture of Hillary Clinton. Tired of the lines. Now you can vote by internet. Text to this number. You can't vote by internet. It was a bogus number. This banner was proliferative in the Black community. And they especially targeted young African Americans. Then, when they got closer to the election, they said, well, if you really gotta vote for Jill Stein. She's a going to cast her protest vote. What was the outcome of that election? Black voter turnout dropped. Voter suppression worked. And the election was decided by 70,000 votes in Philadelphia, Detroit, and Milwaukee. And those non-votes flipped the outcome of the election. And that's not the end of it, but I am pointing out to you that there has been a campaign to undermine American democracy. This is not happening in isolation. This is not happening through serendipity, osmosis. This is happening because there are evil people behind the scenes, planning, plotting, conspiring. Because what they see is changing demographics of America, that an active, politically engaged Black community that turns out to vote on a consistent basis makes a powerful difference in American politics. And that when Black America aligns in coalition with other voters, that coalition becomes a coalition that is unbeatable in many states. So we've got to undermine it. We've got to stop it. We've got to thwart it. We've got to do something about it. So fast forward, the 2020 election comes. And because of COVID, as awful as it was, it's killing as was, it compelled states to loosen their electoral laws. So all of a sudden, many states allowed voting. Many states allowed no excuse absentee voting. Many states created drop box voting. And there was an energizing, aggressive campaign on the ground in many places. What was the result? The result was the Black voter turnout was significantly elevated. And you know the result of the election. You know the result of the election. Those changes to voting laws meant that in the 2020 election, less than 30% of all voters who voted nationwide went to a polling place, went inside and cast a ballot. 70% of all voters used a method other than going to the polling place on election day. So what do the plotters then do? Right? January 5th, Raphael Warnock and John Ossoff win the Senate in the great state of Georgia. The day after,
Right.
January 6th.
Yeah.
The same sinister forces engaged for the first time in modern America the use of violence at the Capitol to disrupt the peaceful transfer of power, because they can't be lost in election fair and square. And once again, the cover story came out. The big lie. What am I saying here? We are against confronting, dealing with an organized, sophisticated effort to destroy American democracy in pursuit of power. And it only happens if the power of our vote and the votes of Latinos and the votes of Indigenous Americans and the vote of disabled Americans and the vote of younger Americans gets diminished and suppressed. This is what our report, The State of Black America, paints a picture with facts and with accuracy. So here we are today, 18 months after January 6th, almost 2 years. There have been more than 400 bills introduced in state legislatures across the nation to suppress the vote. Voter ID laws, closing polling places. How do you close a polling place? You change the law to say that the minimum number of people for which there must be a polling place is all of a sudden much larger. So in small communities and rural communities, people may have to go 2 hours to get to a polling place. Cut out early voting, cut out vote by mail. We'll make them go 2 or 3 miles to vote. We'll make them stand in long lines to vote. We'll pass a law saying you can't give them water while they vote. You can't give them a chair while they stand in line. We'll make them have an ID, or maybe 2 forms of ID. We'll make them, why don't you make them have their birth certificate when they show up to vote? We will allow election e-voter purchase. We'll tighten up the purge law that says if you haven't voted in the last 2 years, we'll take off the vote. We'll say that if you have a voter ID, if the address on the voting roll doesn't match the address on the voter ID, you're disqualified. This is what we're confronted with and dealing with in this era. This goes even beyond some of the laws that were passed in Reconstruction in the 1950s, and so we're up against it. To some extent, here in New York, you may not see that in real time, in real terms, because this is happening in Georgia and Texas and Louisiana and Mississippi and South Carolina. It's happening in places like Ohio and Wisconsin. There are efforts to do it in places like Georgia. In some places it can stop on the courts. In some places the legislature stopped it. In some places we had to have gubernatorial vetoes. But the energy and the effort behind this is quite significant. Why is this critical? Our ability to pass an assault weapons ban, or regional background checks, or a new Voting Rights Act, or a George Floyd Justice and Policing statute to end qualified immunity. All of this is being played out on a stage where our power is being diminished. To boot, gerrymandering, racially motivated gerrymandering has been on display in states after state after state. So this is central to every single thing. Let me give you the formula to destroy democracy. And I'm going to give you, so the formula is this: we suppress the vote. We particularly suppress the vote in those states that will help us formulate an electoral college majority. We don't have to win a popular vote. In fact, we can lose a popular vote by 10, 15 million.
Right.
But if we could just carry this sliver of states to get to 270, we can control the presidency. Number 2, we can never let go of those. Why can't we let go of the filibuster? Consider this as an example. There are 12 senators, 6 states, who combined represent 2% of the American population. They represent areas where there's more cattle than people. But because of the structure of the Constitution, those small states like North Dakota, South Dakota, Montana, Idaho, they barely have 1 million people. Some of them have 1 million people. Some have not even 1/3 of the size of they have. 2 Senate votes. When they band together and exercise the filibuster, it means that a small senators representing far less than the majority of the people can block legislation. So we suppress the vote. We try to build an electoral college formula. We hold on to the filibuster, and we control the Supreme Court. And we don't need to win elections by majority in order to do that. What does this equate to? This equates to a system. It becomes a structure through which less than a majority can consistently control the nation. That's not democracy. That is a plot to undermine American democracy. And I'm putting it out here because we need to understand that to counteract this, first, we have to know what we're up against. Number 2, we have to educate our communities and our constituency that the final pillar of the plot to undermine democracy is psychological warfare that leads to voter self-suppression. I'm frustrated. I don't know, none of these candidates excite me. So I stay home, I ain't voting. I ain't seen them in the neighborhood. I'll stay home. I don't like the way they talk. I don't talk on TV. I disagree with them on one thing. I'll stay home. I ain't voting. I ain't excited. They don't excite me. So I'm staying home. And part of psychological self-suppression is an endless series of messages that those elected officials that you elect have done nothing for. They sold you out, they undermined you, on and on and on and on and on. And then we end up in a cycle where we elevate cynicism and frustration as though it is a coherent, intelligent political strategy. Frustration, I'm frustrated. So am I, but it's not a strategy. I'm not excited. That's not a strategy. That's not a strategy. So is that not the office? But my point, I think everybody can get that point out of the story of America and what our work has to be. Our work, people in one of the Black American allies, reactive people, work. I know that. We have to do more work to recognize that we have our work at this point in time. Because what we are up against is very, very real. On the far right, there's paranoia, the white supremacy nationalist movement has been legitimized by Donald Trump. It's okay, it's okay. We see hate crimes against all communities, African Americans, Latinx, Islamic, Jewish, LGBTQ, every category is visible. We witnessed Black people in a store in Buffalo, Latinx kids in Uvalde, Texas. We've seen hate crimes, mass killings, we see gun violence rising in that community, and we see a steadfast use of the power of the spot to block many gun safety laws. So we have work to do. So at the National Urban League, we have launched, we're going to elevate in this election cycle a campaign called Reclaim Your Vote. That campaign is about educating, motivate, and turn people out. This election and be a great of the election. And our work is cut out for us because we are dealing with an undercurrent of some frustration with some hunger in our community. And I don't argue your point because I feel that way as well many times too. But it is not a viable strategy to allow that to consume us into inaction or doing things that are inimical to our best interests. So I know that those of you reading are active in many ways in the community. And I want to encourage that, but we have to do it. We have to, especially with that job, emerging generation. We not just fingers, and we have to meet them where they are. We have to educate them. Our son told me yesterday, 2 or 3 times, he just worked for a physical day. He's one of the next time. Fire, enthusiastic style. That's the Lord's something. Nobody's so I didn't do my daddy thing, so that's it. Boy, you know, let me tell you about, I said, old type. This thing, be engaged with his friends. They don't suck. I don't want to, it sounds like a broken record. Although it's true, you got to find a way to meet people where they are in order to be able to do this. So let me just close up any questions you have. Just saying that we, as a national urban league, proud to be part of the national office is located here since our founding in 1910. We have 92 affiliates across the nation, including these gala to attend that gala. I'm very proud that we will be, Boyd, and hopefully by January 1st, 2025, moving to Harlem. Working on in the planning phase, part of our new building will be the first ever New York Civil Rights Museum, called the Urban Civil Rights Museum. We are working diligently on that. We have preliminary concepts and plans. Central to it will be celebrating the Harlem Renaissance period. Central to it will be celebrating and highlighting the political empowerment movement that has been national and central to Harlem. So when you think about Malcolm X, when you think about Marcus Garvey, when you fast forward to Percy Suffolk, David Dickens, or Al Sharpton, all of this is the product of the power of Black New York and the power of Harlem in respect. So we are very excited about this project that has been many years in making. Somebody asked me, why are you moving to Harlem? I said, first of all, that's where we found it. Secondly, why would I go spend my time and money building dish shelves? If we walk around the nation and we say, stop redlining our communities, we need to own, we need to put our money and muscle where our mouth is. Right? Because we're going back to what we were trying to do. I wasn't part of the decision we were made, and I'm not expecting this. But I'm just going to put our mark on the future of being in Harlem, where we can be a part of this issue. So I'm going to stop there. I know I've gone a while, appreciate the time, and I'd be more than pleased to answer any questions if there is time. Yes, sir.
I'm sorry, introduce yourself.
You suggested that the client set up $1 billion to go to the Ukraine, in addition to the 60 million that we just subbed to Ukraine, while there's needs right here. And I'm hearing thoughts from there that the attorney on Biden administration for sending precious resources elsewhere as opposed to investing in our business.
So it's a very valid point, but I want to level set on this. There was a plan called Build Back Better. That plan, among a number of other things, would have had $100 million for housing in Black communities. Broad investments. When the president initially proposed that plan, it was $6 trillion. $6 trillion. And it reflected so many of the recommendations that we had made. We had made our recommendations in the Main Street Marshall Plan. It got cut down because of congressional politics. All of a sudden, a $6 trillion plan became a $3.5 trillion plan. And why didn't it become law? The fellow from West Virginia and a lady from Arizona blocked it. And it's unfortunate, it's regrettable. I'm not pleased about it, but it just reflects American politics that you can build a bipartisan political consensus to send hundreds of millions of dollars to Ukraine, but you can't build a bipartisan political consensus to invest in the American homeland. And I'm saying that not because I'm happy about it, not because I'm pleased about it. In fact, I'm really not pleased about it. Having said that, there are some opportunities that we have to grab hold of. 1.2 trillion committed to infrastructure in this country through the jobs and infrastructure bill. However, it's where politics, who will decide where that money goes? The decision will be made by state governments, transit authorities, port authorities. In this city, the Port Authority controls the airports, airport boards, and State Department of Transportation. So right now, right here, there's state elections. People running for governor, lieutenant governor, running for the assembly. Call the question. Will you ensure? Will you commit? Will you guarantee that these monies are going to be spent in Black New York and in Black communities? So we do need and to recognize that it's a high level of disappointment that that large plan did not pass. We had worked in the final stages for the club. Thank for her incredible advocacy, Maxine Waters. When the housing money dipped to 20 million from 100 million, she said, I ain't voting for it because the money don't go back to 100 million. And the money had gone back to 100 million right before Manchin went on Fox News and pulled the plug on the bill. So I'm offering what I call just facts in terms of what has occurred. What we can't do is we have to continue to make demand. because the point you make is true. We have disinvestment, but let me say this. State of New York has a $200 billion number, $200 billion budget. City of New York is $100 billion budget. There's got to be much more aggressive efforts to redirect that money, because see, if I'm in a red state, and I led, when I was mayor, I had a Democratic governor and a Republican governor. And the Democratic governor was much more supportive of the city. The Republican governor ended up being supportive at the end. But if you have elected officials who you empower, and there's no question about it, this is New York, demand has to be made continuously. And it has to be made with specificity. Let's talk about the jobs and infrastructure. Let me see where this money is going to go. Where's the affordable housing money going to be spent? Is it all going to be spent with the same developers? Look, I'm proud of our project. We have a team of developers, but the lead developer is a Black developer by the name of Meredith Marshall, right? We have Black bankers, Black lawyers. We stretch to make sure that we were going to maximize African American participation. Very good question, very good observation, but we need to understand why we did not get the plan we want. We can't give in. See, if we don't turn out and control the Congress changes, chances for that are gone. Even with narrow control, we couldn't make that. So that's the facts. Other comments?
Yes, sir. Wallace Ford. Yeah. Professor Wallace Ford from Medgar Evers College, and I want to thank you for doing the State of Black America presentation at Medgar Evers a couple of years ago.
Yes, sir.
So certainly appreciate it. Question is, from certainly from the end of the Civil War going forward, the right to vote was just a primal, very important aspect of Black life. People literally died, risked their lives, their livelihood, all the just to get the right to vote. And going through into the 20th century, it still was a very important thing. I couldn't wait to register, but we're talking a number of years ago. What do we need? I guess the question is binary. When did the message kind of get diluted so that you do have people in the younger generation of Black Americans don't think it's really that important to vote? Maybe I don't need to vote, and that kind of thing, as opposed to it having been that primal kind of, yes, you have to vote because these people are trying to kill us if we don't get to vote.
It's a good question. So we were motivated, particularly in the 60s and 70s, after the protest movement and the litigation movement brought about significant change. Right? And we gained the right to vote. We elected Black mayors and Black legislators and African Americans to Congress. I think where people, when it comes to voting, they will ask, how am I doing? And sometimes if they feel like their lives and their conditions have not changed, they ask the question, what have I been doing? And these politicians not delivered. And I think that disconnect is one of the driving disconnects. When people say, I can't pay my rent. I can't pay the mortgage. I can't afford to buy a home. I'm working 2 jobs. I went to college. I got a bunch of debt on my head. Those factors, I think, put people, enough people in a posture where they're like, the system is failing. And that's what I believe is happening today. We had a zeal generation in the 70s, the 80s, and the 90s to make history because we believed that if we got to the table, we could bring about change. And I say this because I was an elected legislator, and I took my responsibilities very seriously. And therefore I was very aggressive. I was very forward pushing. I took some risks to push the envelope to bring about changes, and I took a lot of hits. For example, get Black people involved in the economics of the community. I redirected a lot of public money, public funds to Black communities. And I just, you know, sometimes I just have to strong arm it, but, you know, I had a favorable majority on my city council. And I took the position that if I could convince the public, then the politicians will follow. So I think we're dealing with something here about people's disconnect from the system. I said this to several elected officials, and I've said this before. The public needs to see you out here fighting. They need to see you in dignity. They need to understand that you're fighting. And that counts. You see, look, he is one despicable human being, Donald Trump. But he's a show. And whether I saw him get up and say, we've cut these regulations, we've got the best economy, and not one thing of it was true. I'm not saying you're supposed to fib, lie. I'm saying that people want to see their elected officials fighting and working for them. Sometimes if they don't see, I tell a lot of elected people, you ain't gonna get nowhere quiet to get the job. You have to be out here, you have to talk to people. I think there's a disconnect. And I think people have turned on, at the end of the day, people evaluate how they like it. They evaluate, you know, they say, how's so-and-so doing? Well, they're gonna really say, well, how am I doing? And if I'm happy, if I feel like I'm making progress, then I'm gonna say something good. So we have to recognize that we're in a period now where our people have now seen Black mayors, Black presidents, Black vice presidents, Black attorney generals, Black US senators, Black mayors, Black congressmen. So it's no longer, and we've seen our ability to elect our allies. Numerous people who are not African American, who the Black vote is an essential part of their constituency and their coalition. So we can't say to people, well, you know, I remember we'd have campaigns back home in the 70s. We elect the first Black judge, oh yeah. First Black clerk of court, whoa. First Black mayor, whoa. First Black Supreme Court justice. Boy, this is a big thing. Just the appeal of making history generated the enthusiasm. That's not now. That's not now. And we have to rethink and have to recognize and meet people where they are. One reason why young people tell me, you know, I'm frustrated, I'm gonna say, let's run for office. Put your name out there. Go claim leadership. And I say to young people as well, you can protest politics. It's not separate from electoral politics. One is complementary to the other. Because protest politics is designed to move people in power. The only people who can propose a law in the New York legislature is the New York legislature. And so I say protest is an important, viable element, but voting and electing and engaging civically is as well. They go hand in hand. I think I've overstayed my time. Let me just thank you. Let me recommend, we brought some copies, but the entire report's available online for all of you. I really deeply appreciate it. And thank you all so much for listening to me this evening. God bless you.
You know, that's,
Yeah, that's